you. I just wanted to do a quick check-in. You got to know each other a little bit better. Did the energy shift for you? And for some of you, it might be like, yes, for sure, I feel so much better. And for other people, maybe it didn't, but this little tiny acts of just saying hello to somebody can change the whole vibe in a space. This is my family, by the way. My husband and my kids, Adeline and Jaden. And safety and security don't just happen. The result of a collective consensus and public investment. We owe our children, the most vulnerable citizens in our society, a life free from violence and fear. And my guess is that everybody is in this room because they want to have a kinder, more compassionate world. And that's why you're in this conference in the first place. I'm a mom of two. My kids are 6 and 9. I'm a restaurateur, as I told you. It's an all-vegan restaurant. We wanted to live by our compassionate ideals, and so we started with the food that we put on our plate. But we really wanted to do more. So we wanted to have an ethical lifestyle. We did compostables and organics, and we were saving the planet and doing all that we could. But we saw that there were so many injustices happening in the world. I mean, I was a teacher. I worked for a very long time, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But it felt overwhelming. What could I do? We were also really busy. Owning a restaurant is not for the faint of heart. So my husband worked 85 hours a week. I worked 50 to 60, and I was a full-time mom. I'd often say to my husband, like, I'm a married full-time single mom, like full-time working single mom. He'd get home at midnight, and he'd leave at 6 a.m., and so it was an exhausting life. And so how could I still do all the things I wanted to do and not lose my mind? But we had to start somewhere. And the restaurant was something that we were doing, we knew we could do. And so we started by hosting. We're a business. Obviously, we need to make money to survive. That's what you do as a business. But we started hosting nonprofit dinners every Sunday night. Our restaurant was in Berkeley, California, which is why I'm here and was invited. But we just moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. So I actually just flew in a couple days ago. But we started doing benefit dinners for local nonprofits, donating 30% of all of our sales every Sunday night. Because it's the reason why we did this thing. The whole purpose was to make a difference for our communities, and I am not available to do all of the things that I need to do, and the nonprofits are doing it. You're doing it. I mean, you're fighting the fight, and it's a hard fight, and there are so many fights right now and challenges. So the other thing that we did in the restaurant is we had a very small restaurant. I mean, it was 30 seats, and we took the time to get to know a lot of our customers. People kept saying, why don't you open another space or get a bigger space? I was like, physically, I can't do it. And my being here is part of what I think makes us special. I'm here, and I try to talk to everybody that's there. When there was an adoption, we celebrated together. When there was something sad, we hugged on it. And my customers from Berkeley still email me and write to me while I live in Charlotte, and are all talking about when they come out to Charlotte, they're going to come to the restaurant. And so I created a whole nother family for myself in that restaurant. And it was amazing. By giving a little, just a hug to somebody that I didn't know, ended up creating an entire support system for myself, which was a magic thing. Sometimes with that also came some learning experiences. There was this one time that we run credit cards and we do everything that we do. And so these women, and they were African-American women, and they had their credit card, and on the back of it, it said, please check ID. But you write that on there, and most people still don't check your ID. But I always check ID because I assume when they write it on there, there was a reason that they wrote it on there. So I had run a card for this white couple that happened to be sitting next to them, and I didn't check their ID. And then it was an African-American couple. I checked their ID. And I felt an energy change, a very drastic energy change between our relationship. We'd been talking and laughing the whole time. and then something changed, and they left, and I was like racking my brain trying to think what could happen. And I chased them down the street as they were walking to their car, and I said, I don't know what happened, but I know something happened. But if it was about the credit card, your credit card told me to check your ID. And they said to me, that happens to us so often. People don't trust us. And so they left. They drove off, and they didn't leave me a tip, and it was fine, and I was feeling really bad because I didn't fully understand what had happened. They came back 15 minutes later. They had checked their ID and remembered that they had written on there. And they said, thank you for coming out and acknowledging that we were upset. And that kind of racism happens to us often. And so sometimes we forget that we've asked for it, but it felt separate. And so the fact that you acknowledged it, we wanted to also do our part, and they came back and brought me $5. And it seems like such a small story, but what I also like to tell people is that if you recognize something happened, it was a small thing. It was an honest mistake on both of our parts. But if I'd left it, it would have been a big feeling for a long time for both of us. And so because we acknowledged that there was an interaction that didn't feel good, we were able to change it. And then they're my regular customers, and we love each other. And that only happened because we were able to change it. And they may never have stepped back in the door, which wouldn't, it's not good in any front. Another part of us getting close with our customers, this is Jeb. And he was a customer who came every other week or every couple of weeks. And Jeb was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I'm sorry, it's really sad, actually. But he always ordered his oyster mushroom chowder every time he came in. He came in with his friend. He was part of a Zen center in the area, and he came in with his buddy, and they would have a glass of wine, and they would talk about life. And he was so kind. He was one of the kindest people I'd ever met. He would always ask about my kids, and some people ask about your kids, but they don't really care about your kids at all. But he really wanted to know, and he always wanted to see pictures, and he was really thoughtful, and he'd remember something I said last time, which I can't even remember what I said 2 minutes ago. And so when he was diagnosed, he'd continue to come in and get his soup, although not as frequently because he didn't feel good. And on those days that he didn't come in, we'd send him home with his friend, the chowder, because he was our friends. And I don't know how many of you have had to deal with somebody with terminal cancer, but the person fades away. It's this, they sort of diminish a little bit, not a little, a lot. But he had these big dreams of becoming a Buddhist monk, and he was in a Zen center. He lived there his whole life, and he was scared to do it. He didn't feel worthy of it, and so on his dying days, he did it. He became ordained as a Buddhist monk. And he was constantly talking about the importance of family and connection. And so he's part of the reason why we ended up moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, because our family is all spread out on the East Coast. My parents are in South Carolina. So transitioning. I really know that all of our decisions and life decisions are really difficult. Every decision that comes your way, small and big, are really difficult. And our lives are really demanding with obligations every day. And they take a lot from ourselves. I don't know how many of you ever feel this, but sometimes I have gotten so overwhelmed. I have lost myself. I've forgotten who I am. And I'm doing all this good work, and people are so proud of me. And I'm like, I don't even know I'm just doing motions sometimes. Like, I'm so tired with all that. So how can we make a difference? And my idea is that we focus on just the simple task of being welcoming. In my move to Charlotte, North Carolina, I was nervous like I am today. And is it going to be a better move for my family? Am I going to make any friends? Will my kids be happy? Will there be people that agree with me in the politics of the world? I didn't know. I didn't know anything. It was all unknown. When I got there and I arrived, there was a neighborhood party, and they invited me to this party right away. And everybody, 100 people came up to me and introduced themselves, which is very daunting. But they all came up and introduced themselves to me, and I felt so warm and so welcome because they all wanted to know who I was. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. They were just saying, hi, I live over here, and I live over here. But I'd never lived in a neighborhood like that before. I mean, I was the one who was obnoxiously going on all their doors like, I got wine. We need to be friends, because I like to know my neighbors so we can look out for each other. I did that in North Carolina too, but and that getting to know people and feeling welcomed made living out of boxes. I don't own any furniture. I was flying back to Berkeley to come do a talk, and I don't even have childcare. All of those things that are a little bit stressful but important to me, I could still do them feeling more comfortable because I had felt so welcomed. It made me feel safe. So I don't want to talk the whole hour and a half because it will be a lot of talking. But I do think it's important to think about times that you felt welcomed. And this might be a difficult task for some, and it might be a really easy task for others. But I want you to think about a time maybe you walked into a store and that representative was super genuine, or a colleague checked up on you when you had just started a job, or you did your nonprofit work and a client was super excited about what you did. So I'd like you to get to know a couple more people and talk about with them what is a simple gesture and a grandiose gesture that made you feel welcomed. And if you can do it with somebody that you don't know. And if it's hard for you, we will talk about that in a second. It's okay. But if you can try, just try. And I'm going to just say, go. You can do it. It's meant to be hard, so just see what other people say. I'm doing all right. Set 2 minutes. Set the timer for 1 minute. It's okay. Welcome. All right, let's come back to our seats. Hello, everybody. Is there anybody who's willing to share a similarity that you might have seen, that a collective thought that seemed to come up for a few people about what made you feel welcomed? Or was there any kind of welcoming thing that, I'm sorry, I keep saying thing, but it's my nervous word, thing.
I was just sharing, I'm actually into...
I think we need to get the microphone to you because for the online people, sorry.
Sorry, trying to multitask. Not well.
Right here.
I was just sharing, I'm newer to San Diego and newer to my place of employment, and my supervisor wasn't even like in the office on my first day, but she made an intentional effort to come by the office to say like, you're here, I know you're here, I want to see you, I just can't be here today. And that as I've been getting to know the area and the people that are doing similar work, she's been very intentional about not just saying like contact this person for this or go to this, but intentional emails or opportunities where she comes with me or she sends out an email with both of us CC'd to share her relationships with me through her instead of just like connecting me, I guess. So intentionality is really, I think, the big piece of it.
Amazing. Thank you. Anybody else? I'm sorry. They told me that the online people, I know that's the online people, I think can only hear through the microphone.
Okay. So I had an opportunity to talk to a lady, and she was with a job for 22 years and left and started this other job. And there was all this like, oh my gosh, what's it going to be like? Because there's all this security when you're at a job for that long, which I could relate to because I've been with my agency either 29 or 30 years this year.
Woo.
So I was relating to that part that she said. But then she told me that how she felt welcome was her new job. They threw like a little party for her, a little welcome party.
Oh.
And everybody came around to introduce themselves to her and stuff. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful way to kind of integrate her into her new family, right? Her new work family. So that was really cool.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing and for talking with each other. All of our experiences are different in how the world accepts us. So this exercise might have actually been really difficult for some of us, and actually for the opposite reason that we think. For some of us, we might be welcomed in every space that we go to, so we don't even think about the fact that we are welcomed there. When I come into a space, almost always am I just supposed to be there? And for some people, they can't. So it's a lot harder for somebody who's always welcomed to think about ideas about how you're welcomed. Because you're always welcomed. You don't get to see the other side. I bet when we get to a place that was unwelcoming, it's going to be a lot easier for you because you're going to really know a time when you felt unwelcomed. So for those that it was easier for some of you, that might be because the experiences or the amounts of times that you have felt welcomed were less significant. They happened less often. And so that time can come to you right away. I mean, you might always feel welcomed and really recognize it, and you're really good as well. But for some of us, it might be because it's just how life is. We are always welcomed. I can go into a supermarket, I'm welcomed there. I worked in the mission of San Francisco, working with children who were expelled from school, coming out of juvenile hall, many of whom were in gangs, and all of whom had language-based learning disabilities. And I would listen to the children's stories about being trafficked, drugs, violence, shooting, death of family members, and the difficulties of getting food on the table. When I was a kid, I picked up worms. I didn't have to think about any of those things. It was a privilege that I had as a kid. I could just be a kid. I played with worms and spiders and climbed trees. And so that experience as a teacher coming in to something so drastically different from myself, and being able to listen and be strong. You have to stay strong for the children. And you have to remember, which many people don't, that they're children who have had major experiences in their lives. The sad truth is that many of those students would talk to me about how much they hated teachers and how much they hated school. And that feeling was very strong. I had one student that I made a very strong connection with, but it took a very long time. And when he did open up, he said he felt like a bad kid all the time. He was like, they don't get it. I'm just a bad kid. They don't like me anyways. And he was a very intense kid. He would disrupt the classroom. I didn't have support when I was in the classroom, and he was flipping desks. There was no one to help me while he was flipping a desk. He'd fly off the handle and start yelling. And so that idea of a bad kid for some teachers is he was a bad kid, in that idea of you're yelling. But, I'm sorry, I lost where I am. The thing is, it's harder when you're working with a student who doesn't act like they appreciate you, or you think that they don't acknowledge you. And acknowledgement comes in many different forms, and it can look very different. And my student, who I had a connection with, was not going to be like, yo, Miss Jones, I love you. That wasn't going to be a thing. They weren't going to be excited about the lesson. They weren't going to be excited about anything. It was the quiet moments that made me understand that he felt safe in my classroom. It was the fact that he told me a little bit about his story, or that he told me a little bit about his history. After this very long absence that he had because he often came in and out of school, I chatted with him about, where have you been, what happened, and he was off dealing with somebody, and he felt like there was no choice. It was a family member, and this is one of the ways that they got food and supplies on their table. And I don't know if you've been into the mission lately, but the mission has become very upper class white now, and it wasn't that. And so it's a very expensive place. It was getting harder and harder for people to live in the mission. So I know a lot of you aren't from San Francisco. How many are from San Francisco? Nobody? You're from San Francisco, so you know with me. So the mission was a mostly Latino community, some African American families, but it was a much poorer but tight-knit community. But the white families came in, lots of young hipsters, IT guys, and they moved in, and it is now a very trendy, upscale shops and things. I think there was a pirate bookstore and all these things. I was very surprised when I went there last time. And so you wonder, where are those kids? Where are the families that lived there who have been moved out from that area? And they were, it may seem hard for us to understand, but dealing drugs is a quick way to get food on the table. And that might not sound good for you, but it's getting a job and waiting for a paycheck for 2 weeks is not going to work. And some of the support systems that are set in place, some people who are on welfare, if you make over $800, you are dropped off welfare. You make 801, you don't get welfare anymore. What can you get with $800 in San Francisco? Nothing. I digress. He also said that, he was like, what is there for me in life? Because we had talked about education as being an alternative. I was like, look, I know you're going to be out dealing drugs right now because that is your reality. But you can do both right now if that's what needs to happen so that you can have an alternative later. Because education is the only thing that can get you out of the cycle. And I said, what's going to happen if you continue doing what you're doing now? And he said to me, I'm going to go to jail or I'm going to die. It's what's happened to everybody in his life, and it's what was going to happen to him. And he said, I'm a teenager. He's a junior in high school with a second grade reading level. What can I do? There's nothing. I have no skills to give. Oh, mother of all things. I talk too long. This is supposed to come a while back, I think, but I think this is really important. A smile is the universal welcome. It really does change the whole feel, that connection that you have with somebody. People might hear your words, but they feel your attitude. And I think this is extremely important in a classroom to think about, but not just in the classroom, because this is everyday life. The interactions you have with kids, this is their life. They're in a full-time job and you are their bosses. So this is their lives. And so we have to make sure that when we're saying things to our children, we're saying them with genuine thought and feeling, and that we bite our tongue when they're driving us nuts. Because my own children drive me nuts, but I wouldn't tell them to F off and put them in the corner, which students have told me, teachers have told them in the past. And I don't mean to make that sound light, but too many kids said that story for it not to be happening in schools. And we need to step up our game to make sure that we call out our colleagues who are acting that way. And then you can't be fake about it. I mean, if you want to know about your kid, they're going to tell you some things that are going to be shocking to you, potentially, and you have to just take it in and not express it back. That feeling of whatever it is that comes up for you, trauma, like shock, or why don't somebody do something different, or the parents, or blah, 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 all the things that come out for people. It's all just hate that you're spewing back, even if you're not saying something. So my question is, what happens when a society and the people within it feel unsupported and unwelcomed and uncared for? We have a system right now that creates a stuckness for people. If you are poor, it is very hard to not be poor. And that's not for all people. It's not for everybody. Some people get out of that situation. But we have a whole system set up that makes, if you are poor, you will stay poor. If you are rich, you will stay rich. I mean, all of the things. If you are kind, you will stay kind. Because we are stuck. And there's a whole system that makes us feel stuck. We're busy, we're blah, 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 and we don't change. I'm sorry, I don't know why this cut off, but I can give you, if you want this link later, this is an article. 50% of our prisons are filled with folks that have a learning disability, which means they went through their entire academic life without getting the support they need to have their personal needs met. That could have been food, diapers, childcare. If they're a teen mom, maybe it was a babysitter. Maybe it was their parents had difficulties with drugs or alcohol, and that we needed in-home treatment. Everybody's like, call CPS, but really that doesn't do anything. That puts a child into the system. What we can do, I'm going to digress from my thing. My last year of teaching, it was the thing that really got me. I worked with a student who hadn't been to school for any amount of time in their entire 6 years. That year was the first year I was teaching at this school, and I worked with this student, and I got to know the family. I got very close with the family. They would come in every day. I would greet them. I would say hello to them. I'd give them a hug when they arrived because they had shown up. And they liked that, and so they kept coming in. The family kept coming in. Mom eventually told me secretly that she needed to turn herself in to go to prison, and that there were issues with drugs. So I said, okay, well, we can do this together. Let's get Grandma on board so you can turn yourself in and make the choice you have to make so that this doesn't become a bigger issue. And let's get a drug treatment program for you that will meet you in a neutral spot so that you can start working on the issues that you need to be working on. That student came to school every single day that year. Grandma helped when Mom turned herself into prison. Mom got out of prison, kept doing the work. The drug treatment program met in my classroom after school hours at 6 p.m. so that we could get the work done, and that family was there every day that year. I was written up 6 times that year. I would have done it the same way. I would have changed nothing. But I think as a whole system, it's all about protecting ourselves and not telling them what services are out there, not telling them what's on the IEP. But I think we need to be open. We need to help our students. And if we don't do it in a more holistic way, then they are not going to be able to access information that we are teaching them. Math doesn't matter if food is not on your table. The other thing that I want to say is that we expect kids and adults to behave in a certain way. There's a social code that we all live by. We were all polite, we said hello. There's a social code that we do. And it doesn't matter what your background was or what your life situation was. We expect you to behave in a specific way. So I wanted to explore that idea a little bit. So I have a 6-year-old, I told you, Adeline, and she is a feisty little bugger. And she's bossy, which I'm grateful for because I want a strong, bossy little, young woman, but I don't want her to be strong and bossy at me. But when she's frustrated with me, she crosses her arms, she looks at me, stomps her foot, and says the worst thing she can think of to me, like, I hate you, Mom, or something she knows is going to really dig in deep. When my 15-year-old student is mad, he stomps his foot, crosses his arms, flips the table, and says, well, I won't say that out loud. But it's something very inappropriate. But the behavior is the same. It's the exact same developmental behavior. My 15-year-old student, who is reading at a 2nd grade reading level, is developed in the same way as my 1st grader daughter. The behavior is the same. But it's a scary thing to have 15-year-olds go like this to me. They're way above me, and this desk just went upside down, and it can feel really scary. But we have to recognize that he is a child doing an action that is the same action that every kid in this world does when we're frustrated. When I get mad at my daughter, she acts worse. She talks back or does all of the things that teenagers do, but she's only 6. And when I yell, she's actually getting rewarded for that behavior. That yelling is attention, which is what she wanted in the first place, because most likely I was on my phone trying to get a business email out or talking to somebody or cooking dinner or whatever it was that was not drawing my attention to them. And because she's 6 or because somebody is developmentally unable to communicate their needs appropriately, then they are going to do anything they can to make themselves heard. And it's up to me to figure out what they mean. I'm going to give you a little example from my own life. Corporate Goliath phone conversations like AT&T, PG&E, Verizon. I was on the phone with PG&E for 2 hours this one time, and they kept transferring me, and I was so mad. I was I don't know what happened to me. I'm a fairly nice person, and I'm kind of quiet, but I was on the phone yelling at this PG&E representative after 2 hours, and I got off the phone, and my husband was like, "What's up?" And I was bleh! Yelling at him and then yelling at my kids, and I was so frustrated. And the first thing my husband said was, "You need to calm down." And I don't like to be told to calm down. And that made it much, much worse for me. And so I want to point out that even as adults, with appropriate developmental behaviors, we can't always control our emotions. We lose our beep sometimes because it is too much. And imagine if everything that you did felt like too much. The pressure was too high at all times. You were always asked to do something that you didn't understand. So why am I bringing up my poor behavior? Because, my reactive behavior that I encountered. Well, we all have what I call generational behaviors, And I watched a talk yesterday that was, let's get explicit about implicit bias. I don't know if you saw it, but it was also incredible. And I would watch that video later. If you didn't watch it, it was really good. But we have all been taught patterns within our life that have been passed down from generation to generation. And some of those patterns we are all continuing to work on today. Doesn't matter what your age is, where you are from, what your background was. There is something in our lives that we are working on, or that we're grateful that we have, that were passed down from the people above us. My mom and I are besties. It's part of why I moved to South Carolina. And her mom was a very big yeller. The 50s, did a lot of yelling. There was all about what you looked like on the outside, and there was a lot of yelling that happened. My mom was also a yeller, but she had done some work, and at some point had decided like there's going to be no more yelling. That was a little weird when that happened, because we were yelling, and we'd fight, and then all of a sudden like she stopped yelling and would be silent, and I'd be like, this is when we're supposed to yell. But she did it. She did the hard work to do that. But she still had that. And so myself as well, I also have to fight that urge when I am exhausted and I go home at the end of the day and my kids are like, Mom. All I want to do is just be like, go to your rooms. And sometimes that comes out too. She also passed on. My mom was super energetic, super active, super friendly. She says hello to everybody. She's way more energetic than I am. But she passed on some of that to me as well. So it's not all negative. These generational behaviors or these things that were passed on to us are just part of what makes us us. So, I'm sorry, I would like just a show of hands if you think that you have a difficult generational behavior that you would like to break in your life. I know I do. Some maybe not. How many of you feel like it would be awesome if there was somebody there that could support you or tell you strategies for how to break those generational behaviors? Maybe some of you do. Like some of you might go to therapy or do things that you're doing, the hard work. And the other question I have is not quite related to generational behaviors, but have you lost it like I did with PG&E with somebody because of something else that's going on in your life that had nothing to do with them? Yeah. So why am I bringing all of this up together? PG&E, generational behaviors, ingrained ideas, feeling welcomed. It's kind of all over the place. If I had said to you, every parent, that yells, every parent who yells is going to be followed around, is going to be told off all the time, and is going to be ostracized from society because they're a yeller, we would be like, you would never do that. You would never do that because maybe if they were like obnoxiously yelling in the middle of the courtyard, but you wouldn't do that to somebody. But we do that to other people for their ingrained behaviors, for the behaviors that they learned all through their childhood. And then their parents, our students' parents, have the same exact behaviors. And we're like, well, they're grown up now, so they should know better. But they can't just change those behaviors that they had because they had those behaviors from their parents and they've been passed on. We were all taught and indoctrinated with a set of thoughts that we don't even realize we have or we prefer we didn't. This includes racism, sexism, homophobia, judgment of other people's actions. They're all a part of our ingrained behaviors. They're lessons that each of us have to be really mindful of so that we could actually make a change. We have to recognize those behaviors within ourselves, which is a huge task in of itself, to know what behaviors you have that you want to change. And so I think this is an opportunity for us as teachers and people of the world to start to think compassionately about other people's interactions with us. it's usually not even about us. It has nothing to do with us. They're not yelling at us at the supermarket because we're in their way. They're yelling because of some other factor in their life that we don't know about. So I have this idea. Do you think a feeling of safety is enough to change the world? It's just something to think about. I have a few questions that are all around the room. So if you can smush the desks in just so it's a little easier for everybody to have access to go all around the room when you get up. There are questions like, what were your learned behaviors? So I'm asking you to get really vulnerable right now if you feel like you can do it. And maybe you can do it with a friend. But then, and there's markers right here. We can get some of those out. What were your learned behaviors? These could be little silly things like maybe you're a jokester. Maybe you are practical. Whatever, your parents were practical jokesters and you are as well. It could be bigger things like your parents are racist, so you have some racist ideas that you were taught. This does not mean you're racist. Because your parents were racist does not mean you were racist. But it does mean that that is something you have to be very mindful about in your life. And we were all taught negative things, positive things. We were taught certain things about certain people in our lives. And so I think it's really important to reflect on what those things might have been, what subtle things people might have done. The other questions you are going to see are, what would you want to break? Like patriarchy in my family, there were 3 girls in my family and a boy. And my dad, I was the oldest, and my brother was the youngest. Now, one of the girls in my family were taught how to use a tool. But my brother is very good with tools now. But I'm teaching him YouTube, baby. And he doesn't now. It's changed now. The world has changed. My dad's changed, and he's taught me how to use some things now, and he gives me advice on the phone. Are there times that you felt judged? So if you go around, it's just these little papers. I'm sorry, they're like a hack job. I did it really late last night. I flew in with this roll of paper in my suitcase. It was very weird. But if you can go around, help each other out, think of ideas, be vulnerable if you can. I understand if you can't, but because you don't want to hear me the whole time, it's a good time to just self-reflect. So there's papers over here all the way around the room. Oh, they will? Oh, somebody else brought those to me. Okay. Sorry. Well, this is thinking time. You can use your pen. Like if you have a pen, you're taking notes with, you can use your pen. I have a couple little pens here. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, these will bleed through.
Oh, yeah. Somebody brought those, but I didn't even think about that. I was too nervous at the time. Oh, good. Yay. Great.
Just not the yellow.
You have
it
a-
won't show up.
Right.
It smells good, but it won't show up.
Can you do me a favor? I want to switch some things around so she can have more access to some of the ones that maybe she can't get to from behind. Unless you can make it so that she can
we
wheel
bring
her
them to
around.
her?
Yeah, that's what I was
When-
just
yeah.
wondering. I don't want her to feel on the spot at the end, so maybe switching them out or. Let's do one more poster. I know you probably haven't gotten to all of them, but.
You're doing a good job for being nervous.
Thank you. I'll watch it later and see how that.
I'll have to figure that out, how to watch the videos.
Yeah, I think she said in 3 to 5 weeks they'll be posted
We'll
on
be able to look
YouTube
at them.
somewhere. Yeah,
Good.
for sure.
Actually, got 2:15 for a flight, so I'm just letting
Yeah,
you know
no
that
problem.
that I'm not being rude.
Oh yeah, no problem. Thank you for letting me know. And just the idea of timing, I want to make sure we get to all 12 because I have 12 thoughts. So I'm going to pull us back in. But if you have time afterwards, you can finish off your ideas or check out some of the other thoughts. We've talked about feeling welcomed. We've talked about our ingrained behaviors. We've talked about developmental behaviors. I think we've touched on feeling unwelcomed, but I just wanted to say how powerful feeling unwelcomed can be as well. I have 2 quick stories. One was I was a working mom, and when I opened the restaurant at the beginning, my daughter was 1 and my son was 4. So I was like really in it. And I had a baby that I was wearing. And there was this meeting that I was going to go to. It was other working professionals that are in the food industry, in the vegan food industry, so that I could get to know them. And it was really, I really needed that. I just needed to be around other adults who were doing what I was doing, except my babysitter couldn't make it, or something happened. It was forever ago, and I can't remember what it was, but so I asked, is it okay if I'm wearing my baby when I go to this meeting? And they said yes. And I went to the meeting, and it was very clear. There was only 8 people that showed up to this meeting, but it was very clear that me having my baby there was not welcome at all. And it was little things that happened. Hi, and then go off to talk to somebody else. Or a look of like, there's a baby. And I 100% get it because some people just are there not to be with children. They want to be adults in a space. And I just wanted to connect with adults in a space. And so I was desperate to do it, and I was trying to do it anyways. And it was a time where I was like, oh, wow, I should go. And another time, I'm Jewish, and There's something that people say a lot, and they don't even know they say it. I'm going to get this great deal. I'm going to Jew them down. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's kind of a Midwestern thing maybe. I don't know. But it's surprising to hear it, and people don't even know they're saying it. It's just a phrase that people say, and it catches you off guard. So those are two things that have made me feel unwelcomed. So sometimes that feeling of unwelcome can be really subtle. Sometimes it can just be overt. And so I would ask you, is there anybody who would like to share something subtle that has happened to you that made you feel unwelcomed in a space? You have to use the microphone.
I don't know why I just volunteered.
Because you're so brave.
But I just thought of something that just came to me. It's your blue eyes.
What is that?
Just
oh,
people
your
would-
blue eyes.
People would say, "Oh, your blue eyes."
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
You know, you're privileged. You've
Oh,
got
yeah.
blue eyes.
Right,
I've heard that a lot.
right. Can happen. How about anybody else?
This is a really vulnerable moment, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. And because I texted my colleagues at work about this. When I came in here, I was the only one sitting on this table. No one came and sat with me for the entire time. Now, some people were already here, so we can't blame them. But the rest of the people, and it was just, and it's a common thing that Muslim women in hijab go through. Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people of color here too, which is odd. Now, this very nice lady talked with me, which was really sweet of her. And you know, these two lovely ladies, of course, sat with me. But I'm thinking, well, because there were probably no other chairs that were here. Probably not. But this is a common occurrence for women in hijab. I don't know why that is. We're American. So, you know, yeah, so I just thought I'd throw that out there.
It's a good call out for us to think about and recognize that. I'll tell you this, yesterday morning I came in and sat in a conference space and sat down at a table, and also no one sat down with me. And sometimes I think that can happen because they all have their friends that they're sitting with. Yeah. And so that can happen in a space like this where I feel like, but I also think it's important for us to recognize that, and that just sitting next to you would have made you feel welcomed, and that nobody did it to make you feel welcomed. And I think we just have to reflect on those little things that we can do to connect with each other. So thank you for sharing that. I know that was really hard. And it's hard for us to hear. I think it's really important for us to hear that as well. Anybody else?
I think Kathy yesterday actually said, make everybody feel welcome. Mm-hmm. But today, I think that's the reason why I sat here on my own, because I just felt like this is so ironic. We're here in an inclusionist impact, and yet there are some people who wouldn't even look at you and say hi. So
it's really powerful. So how does that make you all feel? I feel terrible. I mean, I want people. That's not a bad thing. You shouldn't feel bad that I feel terrible. And it's not. I'm going to get to that in a second. We're just going to sit on that feeling for a little bit. I think it's important that we recognize that is how some people felt here in this event. So you have to know that your students also get that feeling, whether you intended it or not. Because my guess is nobody intended it. I'm guessing that nobody was like thinking in their heads like, she's wearing a hijab. I am not going to sit with her because of that. I don't think that happened. I mean, I don't think it, but I think subconsciously that might have happened.
I think that people gravitate towards people that look like them or that appear to be like them.
Right.
I think that's a common practice. And I guess what this conference is about is to get outside of that comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think Thank you for being so brave about that, because we're going to end this conference with some real insights to ourselves. So I have 12 things, 12 sort of steps, and I'm going to sit on that, and I know it feels uncomfortable that I'm moving on from that idea, but I want us to sit on that because I'm going to come back to it. I think I'll be coming back to it. So I gave you a flyer if you want, whatever you want to do with it. But these are things that have helped. Oh man, this thing. I think this is really important. Everybody in here is a beacon of safety for the people around you. This is something I say a lot. And I'm also going to come back to that. I am far from perfect. I am shy. Sometimes I get uncomfortable. Some days I don't feel like doing the hard work and I seclude myself. So all of the things that I'm suggesting, except for a couple things, and I'll tell you when they are small changes that I think will make a huge impact. And the other thing is, I just want you to imagine if we were all doing small things, small acts of kindness, how we could change the world. Not just the people in this room, not just your neighborhood, not just your family, but if all people did one small act of kindness, how much change that could create. So my first thought is inclusivity and compassion. If they are important to you, it is an active position. It is not a passive one. It is why I'm up here talking, even though it's not my most comfortable position. It's very important to think about what we don't know what happened to somebody 5 minutes ago, 5 days ago, 5 years ago. We have no idea of their life experiences, but what has happened to us 5 days ago, 5 years ago, 5 hours ago can influence our life forever and how we interact with the world. When somebody is rude to you or disrespectful to you or acting in a way that you don't like, most of the time it's not about you. It has nothing to do with you. But you responding with kindness can maybe be the only act of kindness that they have received all day long, all year long. Because if they're always interacting with the world in a negative way, most people are going to interact poorly back to them. If they interact badly, they're going to get it back. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be a pushover and you just take abuse. And I'm going to give an example of what that could look like. And this was the most uncomfortable experience of my life. But I had a customer who came to the restaurant and he treated my staff poorly every time he came in. Be like, what is this? What is the pricing? Blah, 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 blah. Like yelling, the food is not good. You're never consistent. Always yelling at the staff every time. And I said, I feel like you don't like it here. It feels like that to me. And so, but if you do like it here, we need to change our relationship. You and I don't have a relationship. I don't even like you. I want to talk to the boss. I'm the boss. I understand, but unfortunately, I'm going to tell you that you can't come here anymore unless you're nice to people. He's like, you don't want my business? I was like, not at the expense of my staff feeling stressed out every time you come in the door. I'm like, so I don't want you to come here unless you can be nice. So I hope you come back, but you have to be nice. So for 6 months, he didn't come back. It was a little bit of relief. I was like, because he was very hard on everybody. But 6 months later, he did come back. And he wasn't like warm. He wasn't what I would call loving or what most people you would say is nice. But there was a very clear effort being made on his part to be calm, and he said, thank you. For the first time in the entire time, and I knew his name because sometimes when you're bad, like that. You get to know their names. And so I'd be like, thank you, blah, blah. And then he started coming in, and I started saying his name at the beginning of the conversation. He'd walk through the door, and I would say his name immediately. And so then he kept coming every week, and he wasn't awesome. I wouldn't want to be besties with him. But the fact that he felt safe enough, and we felt safe enough to create a trusting communication. He didn't like it at the beginning, I'm not going to lie. I got called all sorts of names at the beginning, including a fascist and everything else that comes along. And it doesn't mean anything. You just throw it away. I'm like, well, I'm still hoping you come back when you're kind. And I didn't take it. I wasn't going to take him being rude to all of everybody. But so that was an attraction. So if we can all do that, give pushback and be firm, not get walked all over, but do it in a way that can be loving, it actually creates a safe space for somebody to change. I'm going to say a couple ideas that I think are bigger ideas, but maybe they'll go back in intentions. Sometimes the intentions are there. So the first, I talked about my students not having access to all the resources that they needed, and this idea of a holistic approach. So on the small scale, I feel like we could create a list, something on paper, and that we hand to every family. Doesn't matter what your background is, what your life skills are, whatever. But there's a list of where to get diapers, where to get food, where are their soup kitchens, where is the nonprofits in the neighborhood, and what are they fighting for? If we worked together to compile that as school systems for California or whatever, nonprofits, we could work together and create a whole resource for our communities and our families. And also, that kids who are offered free and reduced lunches, oftentimes that's their only meal of the day or their most nutritious meal of the day. And I say nutrition lightly because that food is horrible. But if we could make, and I know this is out of our control, but if we could make that food nutritious, that's brain food, healthy food, vegetables, something. I worked with kids teaching about food, and kids couldn't tell me what a zucchini was. In California, in San Francisco, they didn't know what a zucchini was. And I don't know, for me that's kind of shocking because we live in a state that grows food all the time. There's access to food always. So, but the main thing that I want you to remember is that to be inclusive, you have to be an active participant. This is a slide that I was shown at a conference I just went to when I was in Charlotte. It was shared by Taiwo Jaioba, and he works on building cities that are equitable. And I really love this slide because it's so graphic and I can understand it so well. It's talking about equality at the top, and I think about equality and I think about FAPE, free and appropriate education. We have this idea that every child should get an equal education, meaning we have to modify work to help them access the information. But really, we don't want just equality, we want equitable access to information, which means if I haven't eaten, we talked about that before, if I haven't eaten, I can't access the information until I have food in my belly. If I haven't slept or don't have a safe place to be, I can't access the information because I don't have what I need to access that information. So if we're going to be equitable in our school systems and equitable in the world, we have to think about things differently than we've been doing because we can't, it's about access. He talked about how his family moved here and they moved into the city very close, within 2 blocks of the train station. And the reason they did that, and they were grateful they were able to do that, was because it was created an opportunity. If you have transportation, it creates opportunity, which makes life more equitable. Because if you can't get anywhere, you can't access anything. How am I doing on time? Am I okay? Okay. The other is that you need to support the nonprofits that are out there fighting the fight already. A single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up and make new trees. So if I'm working 60 hours a week, I can't always do sweat labor to make the changes happen that I want. But the nonprofits are there doing that really hard work. And so access them, find them, support them. A small donation for a nonprofit really makes a huge impact. And that's hard for us if we're living paycheck to paycheck. But a little bit of support to a nonprofit goes a long way because they try, the good ones at least, to use that money and make it stretch as far as possible. Sorry. We can't help everyone, but we can help someone. This is really important. It was an important lesson for me, and I think it's probably an important lesson for everybody here. It is very important that you take care of yourself without feeling guilty about it. If you are crap, you will present crap to the world. There's no other way to say it. If you are not taking care of yourself, if you are feeling stretched thin, it is going to come out one way or another. No matter how long you try to hide it, at some point, it will show. So if you want to be a good advocate for this world, for inclusivity, then you need to do whatever it takes to be good. Whether that's meditating, eating right, sleeping, being together, connecting, being with friends, going out to the pub, whatever it is. I think it's also important to make sure that there is something in your life that you're doing that makes you so excited. And that could be playing the viola. I have no idea. I don't know why that came in my head. But when I started the restaurant, I was so busy. And after a year, I felt really miserable and a little bit upset and depressed. And I was doing my dream. I mean, the whole thing had come and was successful. Everything was great. But I forgot to do things that I loved. I hadn't read a book in 2 years. I mean, just that simple act of reading a book. And I was like, every time I try to read a book, I'd just blur out and my brain would shut down. And so somebody was like, oh, audiobook, do an audiobook. I was like, audiobook? Like, genius. And I put the audiobook and it did it while I did the dishes. And like, I hate dishes. And now I'm like, I kind of like dishes. And my kids are like screaming and they're like, I'm tuning them out. So I'm not yelling. So it's like 2 birds for 1 stone. I'm like not yelling at them. I'm doing my dishes and I'm getting some enjoyment about it in my life. So this is the one that I'm going to circle us back to what you both talked about. You cannot be afraid to make a mistake. We have all been called out today. And I think that was important for us. But you can't not act because you were called out. But the next time, you will do better because you know. And we are going to make sure that that doesn't happen again, at least with the people in this room. Everybody makes that pledge? They're going to do better? But I think that we live in a very call-out world where it's not always as friendly. I mean, that was an extremely friendly call-out. And we get called out all the time. Whether it's right or wrong, we are called out so often that a lot of people are immobilized and they are scared to do anything. They are scared to connect with somebody who's different from them. They are scared to speak out. They are scared to do anything. And I think that if we freeze and are afraid of doing it wrong, then we are going to do nothing. So it's up to us to keep pushing forward, make the mistakes, because if we didn't make that mistake today and they weren't brave enough to say it, then none of us would have known. And that would have been an unfortunate lesson lost for all of us. I also want to say that there is no such thing as a safe space. We also found that out. Every one of you is a beacon of safety for the person in the room with you. California calls itself a safe state. My restaurant called itself a safe space, but it's impossible to say that. The only way it can be a safe space is if everybody in the room creates a safe space for everyone else in the room. It is up to you to be the beacon for the entire room. And if there is one person that doesn't create safety for another person, then it is no longer a safe space. This is my personal ask, that we be more like a Post-it note. A lot of people have told me, like, why don't you do like a compliment sandwich? And in theory, this is like a nice idea. You say something nice, you say something terrible, you say something nice. But it's very ingenuine. There's nothing kind about it, really, because I just want to say the terrible thing, and I want to tell you the nice things when it's time for me to say the nice things. So I've started training people that I'm like a Post-it note. When I say the tables are dirty, I just mean the tables are dirty. I don't mean anything else. I'm not saying anything about your work ethic. I'm not talking about you as a person. Like, I really just, like, we need to clean the tables better. I mean, there's nothing else to it. But we are all so sensitive now, and we are also afraid to speak our truths, so that we say it in a way that people don't understand what we're trying to tell them, because we beat around the bush. We're like, oh, well, you did a great job, so nice, tables were a little dirty, but the customers were happy. So what did they take out of that? Everything was good, it was good. Like, that's all right, just a little table dirty. But I want them to know, like, tables need to be clean. That's the basics. And then later, I got a compliment from a customer. Thank you, that was awesome. Our kids need to know that too. Like, the beating around the bush, we don't know where we stand. Oh. In the classroom, this is a hard one, but you don't always have to be the boss. So I own a restaurant. I can work side by side along with my colleagues. I don't always have to be the boss. The people don't always have to know that I am the owner of the restaurant. It's almost better for me if they don't. And I can just blend in. But it's just, obviously, the kids know you're the boss. It's not a question about who's the boss in the room. They know who's the boss. But if you can put them into a larger role in the classroom, then they own that space. And so the more you can do it, that they're the bosses, that they're teaching, that they're leading. I learn best when I teach something. Sometimes saying this information, I'm getting it more than maybe you're getting it having to sit there and listen to me. So the same goes for your kids. If they do it, they learn it. The more they do it, the more they learn it. And they feel empowered because they are the boss. We don't need to be in control all the time. We can let that guard go. We don't have to be the boss. And it's also okay to be imperfect. It's okay to tell them that I don't know. I messed up what I taught you yesterday. I gave you the wrong answer. I was a jerk to you yesterday. I didn't acknowledge you in the right way yesterday. All of those things that we do, when our kids in our classrooms they're humans, and we're human. We are going to make mistakes. And all we have to do, and to make them feel better, is to acknowledge that we are also not perfect, just like them. Have no fear of perfection. You'll never reach it. I also am going to say, let your ethics drive your behavior. If compassion is your goal, if kindness is your goal, if inclusion is your goal, let that drive every decision that you do. And be really thoughtful. Have that in your mind. That's your mission statement. I have a mission statement in my business. We all should have mission statements. And it's sort of my mission statement in life. My last is that we need to do, it's homework. That you have to reflect on these ideas. You have to check in with yourself. You have to see if you're doing those things. Did I check in to make sure everybody felt welcome? Did I acknowledge my mistake? And the other thing I'd say, when you make a mistake, don't make it a huge deal. You just have to say, I'm sorry, and then change, do better. I wrote down some of the, I'm running out of time quickly, but I wrote down some of the, I got 5 minutes. So I wrote down some of the thoughts for you to ask yourself or ask your team on a regular basis that you can check in with to see if you're doing the work. The only way to do the work is to be active. And that's to check in with yourself. Am I being the best person that I can be? And And I talked a lot about the classrooms because that's why we're here, but this isn't about your classrooms because it's everywhere. If you're doing it everywhere, then you are going to do it in your classrooms. This is about breaking down barriers in the world. So our politicians, I don't care what side you're on, I'm not going to talk politics, but they both are awful. All politicians are awful. They are not out there to get your best interests. They are not there to break down our walls between each other. They are there to fight these policies to create division and to keep us in that stuckness that we talked about in the beginning, whether conscious or subconscious. It's created that way. There's a two-party system for a reason. We can't make change. So the only way that we're actually going to see change is if I go up to you and I say hello to you. And we've just broken down that barrier. We have to get over our fear of each other and just start smiling more. So my big ask is that we start acknowledging people that we don't usually connect with. Every one of us have somebody in our lives that we walk past every day that we've never said hello to. So introduce yourselves next time you see them, and start breaking down those barriers. So, yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. Oh.
What if you work in an environment where ethics doesn't pay off?
So people treat you poorly.
It's just an unethical work environment. A lot of people work in very difficult environments,
Right.
and here they are trying to be ethical, but it doesn't pay. I would love to hear your experiences about that.
Yeah. Harder for me because I've always chosen jobs that I felt like maybe I could make a difference. That's been a choice that I've always made, but not everybody has that choice. And so what I think in that context, and to what I can speak to about that, is that it's not about what their behavior is, it's about what you want your behavior to be. And my behavior does not have to match their behavior, and I do not have to accept their behavior as how it should be done. It doesn't make it easier to be in that workplace. But microphone right here.
Just to share a resource in terms of the environments you're working in, Acumen, I think it's ACCUMEN. They do free online courses and trainings, and there's one on adaptive leadership about how to impact change in toxic and unhealthy leadership environments. And so it's completely free. They recommend you do it in teams, and they have a lot of other things that you can check out too, but the adaptive leadership one is about creating change from beneath when things aren't positive.
That's amazing. It's Acumen.
Acumen?
ACC.
Let me look it up so I'm not like lying to all of you. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Yes, there you go.
So it's what? ACUMEN. ACUMEN, just for our online folks as well. ACUMEN is a great resource to check out. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Concerns? Thank you so much for coming.